And we are now recording. Hello.
Hello.
Hi, are you able to get the slides up, Kevin?
I got the slides up. Can you see them?
No. Can anyone else see them?
Yeah, I've got your slides up.
I'm not seeing them.
Hold
Here,
on.
why don't we do?
Oh, hold
yeah.
on, hold on. Hold on, young lady.
Okay.
I got them. I got it. There we go. Sorry about that, friends.
No worries at all. All right. Thank you, everyone. Yay! Thank you for being here. Welcome to the Nonprofit Coach webinar series. Here is our webinar, Do You Have Harmony in Your Marketing? I do also want to share that this is part of a free webinar series that I created at the beginning of the pandemic, knowing that I and other people had expertise we could be sharing with nonprofits during a really challenging time. And it worked so well that we've decided to keep it up. So I will say this doesn't replace other types of paid training that you can get from us or other people or other staff, whatever you're going to get your information, but this is a good starting place for you dipping your toe into the information or getting a good framework for what you're doing. So with that, if we move to the next slide, I'll introduce myself.
Dun, dun, dun,
Dun, dun, dun. I am Elizabeth Finlayson. I am the CEO and lead coach of the Nonprofit Coach. And my mission is to create a fairer, more equitable and inclusive world filled with empathy and beauty. My team and I do this by supporting our nonprofit clients with strategic planning and fundraising training and support. I am, for accessibility, I'm going to describe myself here as a white cisgender female. I have long brown curly hair, red glasses, and I am, maybe against some people's better judgment, wearing purple lipstick. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Kevin.
I'm Kevin Donnellon. I'm a bald guy that looks like I'm on SportsCenter or broadcasting Monday night football. I just find this the easier way to basically listen in, and everybody can hear me as I'm speaking. And I am president of Macali Advance, and I do marketing, coaching, and strategy. I do a lot of work for not-for-profits, mostly on a volunteer basis. The other work I do, I've been doing it for 40 years in both marketing and PR, large, small, and emerging brands like Gatorade, Sears, Land's End, Wilson, Prince, a number of different organizations. And I do work for not-for-profits, the Evans Scholars, Marillac House, and Gilda's Club. The Evans Scholars is a full college scholarship program for caddies who are great students and in financial need. Yeah, for caddies. There's been about 10,000 Evans Scholars like myself that have gone to colleges, a lot in the Big Ten, but now we're expanding around the country. I'm a director for the program. Marillac House is a local social service agency here in Chicago. I've been on the board. I've led the communications and marketing committee for that organization, which provides social services for the working poor, both seniors and families who are in need. We do run a daycare and a preschool for the working poor. Gilda's Club, some of you may be familiar with that. It's a cancer wellness center. I'm part of their Red Door Society. So I've had a lot of work, principally on a volunteer basis, with organizations that do social service and nonprofit work. And my mission with them is to really help them grow and sustain growth. And you'll see here today, as I say brilliantly, that I've been known for my enterprising ideas, the engaging service that I provide, and the entrepreneurial spirit that I bring to a lot of organizations that I work for. So That's the bald-headed guy with with the headsets on, so you'll be able to recognize me. What I'm going to talk about today is I call a harmony marketing strategy process. It's simple, it's powerful. I've found it to create a lot of impact and marketing energy for organizations. It helps you get clear and confident and committed to your marketing and helps you grow and sustain growth. And there are 5 components to this harmony program. They all work in sync. So I've named it the harmony process, and have that clever little graphic of the conductor leading, whether it's the horn section or whatever, as part of a band that's either jazz or classical. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. Elizabeth asked me to deal with 4 questions, but I've got 4.5 or 5. And I think we're going to start off with a poll, right, Elizabeth, about how many have a marketing strategy within their organization.
Absolutely. So just take a moment to answer, and we'll share the results.
Wow. So we're doing well there, people. That's great. It's interesting because the number is 40. Research that's been done over the last couple of years says that 26% of nonprofits actually have a marketing strategy. So yay for all you guys. That's great. If so, Elizabeth, it would be okay if we get people to comment on how they created it?
Absolutely.
Everybody want to throw some comments in there in the chat?
Yeah, if you've got a quick thing to say about how you created your marketing strategy or who you worked with. I know some people work with board members to create those, or maybe they have someone on staff who has the expertise. We'd love to hear how that happened.
We're clamoring, or you can raise your hand and and speak too. Okay.
So someone who joined us said they worked a bit with board members, which is fantastic.
Good.
Thank you, Joellen.
Okay. Good.
Herbert says he's got an annual calendar that lays out messages every month, and he works with a committee. Really helpful.
Yeah, the interchange here is really good. Okay.
Oh, someone sharing that first that they were a no, but maybe it would be a half if there was an option. They meet monthly with their social media marketers and have a calendar.
Yeah.
So maybe part of it is really defining like what is a strategy.
Yep. Beyond that, off the cuff. Okay.
And someone said they love the idea of having an annual calendar. Do they have help creating that? And someone saying kind of off the cuff. Yeah, I understand that. Anita's sharing that they have inputs from all levels, develop a calendar, social media. It's interesting, having worked at nonprofits, sometimes they see it coming from the development department and moving into marketing. Oh, Herbert said that I helped. Thank you, Herbert. And for some organizations, you see it coming from marketing and moving across to development.
Yes. Hand in hand is pretty common within that. So it looks like we probably got enough comments there. And I appreciate everybody sharing that. So I think it would be safe to say that everybody is pretty happy with that, with what they're doing. We don't need to go into that too much, but we really want to make sure that it's driving success for you it's not causing any problems. So why don't we just go ahead and start with the first question is, where we actually talked about that. Why is, what is the marketing strategy? It's your game plan. It's how you're reaching prospective clients, donors, volunteers. It's how you're converting them into users, supporters, or influences about your services. It's really that simple. So, in other words, it's being organized, it's being disciplined, and having an approach that's going to actually affect the change that I'm talking about there. So, why is marketing important? I usually focus it on these 8 reasons. First up, it engages your clients, your donors, your influencers. It builds and maintains your reputation. 3, it develops organization and client relationships, kind of the infinity and the glue that connects them. It informs them. It's your hub. Basically, it's your way of informing clients and donors and influencers. You actually can show, when you do marketing most effectively, that it boosts financial support. It helps you gather insights about your mission, particularly when there's a give and take between you and your audience. It maintains relevance, makes sure that you're on people's mind with a great point of view and a great perspective. And then it can make for informed decisions, because when you're out there with a cause and effect, results, input based on outcomes, you're really going to make more informed decisions about what you're doing. And you're really going to do all of these 8 things. And in some cases, these could be 4, they could be 5, they could be 6. And like a lot of things that I talk about with people, it's about priority. You're going to see how priority I talk about later in terms of aspects or one of the components of this harmony system. But it can be anything that you feel. And if you're working with your board members or with a committee, you're going to probably be in a good place to decide which one of these 8 is most relevant to you. So let's talk about what strategy or what process do you use? Can we maybe stop for a minute and hear about processes that people are using within the chat?
Absolutely.
Everybody join in.
And so I'm clear, when you're talking about process, are you saying process for creating the strategy or within the strategy?
I think it's interchangeable, but really, how are you creating it? And then how are you using it? Emails. Okay.
So someone here, is mentioning emails are important part of their marketing strategy.
Thank you, Joellen.
I think I like that the live transcript said females instead of emails. I think females are a very important part of marketing strategy.
all of them on the call today. So anybody, emails, social media? Okay, good. So why don't I jump? Oh,
we've got another one here.
Message.
Okay. Yeah, so Samantha is sharing, e-blast for a bi-monthly message. For larger fundraisers or events, and projects, they hire a PR person and do a press release.
Good. Great. So Elizabeth,
Anita says newsletter. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead.
I think we got another one here just jumped in. Herbert says, we identify an annual theme and try to craft our messages accordingly. We align our messages with what is happening in the organization or the community we serve, recruitment, graduation, national and local events, project highlights, etc. Samantha says they've got a quarterly printed newsletter and an annual report. And yes, I think that's everyone's comments in here. Great.
Good. So as you all demonstrated, there's a variety of options to doing this. And, a lot of times I tell people it's as simple as a calendar of what you're doing and identifying the timeliness of that. But what's really important, and the calendar demonstrates that, is that you've got an organized and disciplined approach to this. It's measuring results, and we're going to talk about what those results can be in a couple minutes here. And it really guides your actions. So you've got an approach, it's measuring the outcomes of what you do, it's driving and guiding your actions. And harmony is just one process. And I like it because it's really simple, it's really impactful. But I tell people, look, it doesn't matter to me whether you use my system. Please just use something that gets you organized, that keeps you on target, and actually keeps you disciplined in terms of what you're doing. So let's just move to the next slide here. Found my little mouse here. Typically what happens is I find that people face these 7 challenges when they're creating a marketing strategy. They don't know where to begin about creating and executing a strategy. They've not allocated adequate time or resources. It sounds like our group here is pretty on top of this. They can't evaluate the effectiveness of the strategy was in place or not. And the people that they have doing it probably don't have the entire cadre of capabilities and effectiveness to do it. They struggle on how to coach their team. Now, sometimes this is a perspective from an executive director or someone in a different part of the organization than a marketing person, but they struggle to coach the team. And sometimes the executive director to the development leader, and we know a lot of times marketing and communications can be within development, they just don't have the time for it. Everybody is short-staffed, everybody's challenged for time. I understand that. And then sometimes when they've done marketing strategy or they've done communications, they haven't seen any measurable improvement in their results since they've done that. And Elizabeth, I think we're going to do a poll here on that.
Yep. All right. So get ready. I will say each of these answers are a little bit longer. So take a moment to read them through. You can click on the ones that apply to you and your organization. I have happy children here in the background.
I was walking in my neighborhood this morning and I ran into a vicious game of tag from the school that was across the street. All of the above. Ooh.
Looks like 3 out of 8, 4 out of 8 have voted. Oh, 5 out of 8, almost complete. We're going to end the poll in about 10 seconds. All right, we're ending now, and we're going to share the results.
So the orange is over 50, right?
Yes.
Okay. It's interesting that the ED question is only 17%. And the other ones I find to be pretty common. Don't know where to begin, don't have the time for it. And one of the things I think is doing something like this is going to result in more time for you because you're going to be doing the work up front, which is really good. So everybody, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. That is very helpful. So this is the beautiful, brilliant Harmony marketing strategy process, and it involves these 5 steps or components. Starts with audience, who we're talking to. Walkaways, really simply what we want our audiences to think, feel, and do as a result of our communications. Channels are basically the platform, the media, the vessels, what we use to communicate to our audiences. We're going to spend little bit of time there and on audience too, more time than on some of these other components. And then what does great look like? How do we know that we're succeeding? And once we've gone through all of those links and gotten synced there, we're going to talk about story and strategy. And I'm going to share some examples of some organizations that I feel have done really well and what those elements that make their storytelling particularly interesting. And I can close out that poll, correct? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, great. So let's talk about the first, which is audience. It's pretty basic, right? But it's amazing how many people can get this wrong. What I find sometimes is people have a particular mission, let's say education, but they're talking to an audience that really cares about hunger. Some people make the mistake they have a child care mission and they're talking about social justice. Now, I know sometimes people support more than one cause, but there sometimes can be primary causes that they basically support. And you need to understand that and you need to focus on this. There's also secondary audiences besides the primary audience of clients, donors, volunteers, and team. There's secondary audiences like influencers, and those can be media, government, any number of other organizations that are external that can influence your audience. So why is it important to know your audience? Well, that's the basis for the marketing content and the channels that you use. It's also based on the time and other resources you use and what you invest in channels. And it really clearly identifies your audience path to success. So that's the first slide that I have on audiences. And what you really... If I could
jump in here for a second,
Sure.
I just want to say that I have found it so common for nonprofits to feel like if everyone isn't their audience, everyone should be. You know, like we're all so passionate about our causes that it's really easy to think that like, well, why doesn't anyone else care about this? And I'm going to make them care and everybody should be doing this, when really we do have a niche. And I think starting with the people that are already supporting and interested, and then looking at those, and then yes, you can look at attracting a different group, but I think it's a different perspective, and I think it's harder for nonprofit people to think that way because we care so much about our missions that we really want it to succeed.
Great point. And on the for-profit side, another way of saying that is there's riches in the niches, which is go deep as opposed to going wide. That doesn't mean, as you're saying, Elizabeth, you don't reach out to new donors or new prospects and perspectives, but particularly nowadays, being focused on those, I think is going to yield more than expanding that on a really thin layer. Deep and spread thick, if it's a good peanut butter sandwich, is a great way to think about that. So thank you for chiming in on that. So moving to the next slide on audiences, you've got to really think about these three things. You've got to collect, organize, and analyze your data. You know, data is rich. I'm going to show you some platforms that you can use to do that, but you've got to know as much as you can about your clients, your donors, your volunteers, influencers, participants. You can expand who those people are, but you've really got to collect and organize your data. You've got to get the segmentation right. You know, we talk about demographics, psychographics, geographics. Who is the person that you want to reach? What do you want them thinking about your brand or about your organization, and where are they located? And then finally, you got to really stretch yourself to look at things like your website, your email, your fundraising, and your donors, and find out who these people are and be as deep as you can be in understanding who they are. You also want to look at referral sources. What are you getting off of search? What are travel sources? What are, traffic sources? I'm thinking about taking a trip now the pandemic's over. Service time I see a TRA, I say travel, excuse me for that. But use Google Analytics, etc. This is just a general idea of how you learn more about your audiences. And then the key thing is to look at efficient and effective ways to use platforms to optimize those features. Elizabeth uses Network for Good. HubSpot is one platform you can use. Salsa Engage is really good. I think I found that on Cinco de Mayo last week. I just love the name of that. Neon, Donor Perfect, and Bloomerang are some other ones that you can use. And when you want to use those, you want to make sure you're optimizing donor management, email analytics, events and grant management, learning whatever you can learn from online donations. And then you're going to want to listen socially to what's being said about your organization online. And social media monitoring is different than listening. Listening is actually what people are saying about your brand, positive, negative, and you've got to factor that into keywords and what you may be learning about the brand, and then work that back in to what you're doing in terms of social media marketing. And how many is it okay, Elizabeth, if we ask about how many people are using and how they're optimizing, if they're using, what platforms they're using? Because I think it would be really good to share that amongst the group here. Could we do that?
Yes, I've actually got a poll we can do, and then we can chat in specifics. All right, here's your poll. Tell us all of the ways that you are currently optimizing your audience engagement.
Great.
All right. Ooh, jumping in now. 3 out of 8, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Good.
All right, give you about 5 more seconds. All right, ending polling, and I'm going to share.
Good. Good. Wow, that's good. You're all
very, it's a large amount for social listening. I'm surprised.
Very, very sophisticated on what you're doing. Love it. Thank you for sharing that. That's great. So once we know about audiences, we really shift over into walkaways. What do you want people to think, feel, and do as a result of your marketing and communications? And it's really, how are you influencing their thinking? How are you creating or reinforcing the feeling, the pull from your brand? And what action do you want? And this is always one of the simplest things to do, but it also becomes really powerful. And when you think about it, here's a way for them to probably consider your brand. This is a valuable mission that's critical to support. That's in its basic form what I want people to think about my organization and my mission. What do we want them to feel? One of the things is no one is close to doing what we're doing in health and wellness. Nobody is doing that. It creates a very aspirational feeling for your brand. And finally, we want to be clear about what we want people to do. Donate, volunteer, participate, and endorse. It really can be that simple. And I lead sessions with people on these 3 things, as well as what I've shown you already. And we plaster the room with Post-it notes or whiteboards on these things. And it really helps successfully drive communications of what we're doing with organizations. So once we know walkaways, we're going to focus on the channels. And based on what I've heard, I know you guys do all of these. I know you do all these. Website and blog are important. And I'm going to show you in a minute what I consider to be the ideal recipe or formula for channels. Media, whether it's paid, traditional, or digital. Elizabeth, do you want to talk about Google Grants at this point in time?
Well, I think, we had mentioned before with Google Grants that they're a great way to increase your visibility within the web environment. And we have someone coming up who's actually going to be doing a training just on using your Google Grants. So I know I'm excited about that because a lot of nonprofits, they get concerned about using them and staying within that budget. The other thing I wanted to add here that Kevin and I had spoken about before we came on was that those of you who work with me know that I say this a lot, that donors who are communicated with on multiple channels, they give higher dollars more often for more number of years. And so they have a greater value to the organization. So sometimes while we know that social media itself often doesn't bring in dollars, we know that your donors who are following you on social media might be giving more and more often.
Yeah, and I would say to think of them as passive or latent might be a mistake, because the engagement is there and it may be hard to measure that engagement from posts, whatever, but I think you've got to do it because you've got to build a reinforcing loop, if that makes sense. So Google Grants can help you be a way to actually get into paid. Social, so many of you have shown that already, is key. I think the affordability of that is important. I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a minute. Earned media, we talked about public relations before, and when you look at the different channels that you use and whether you use traditional news releases or videos, the dissemination of those, public relations can still be really important. Don't forget about mobile marketing. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. Events, whether they're friend or fundraising, are still valuable. Ambassadors, the faces of your brands, whether it's VIP, experts, and celebrities, you want to maximize SEO and SEM, search engine optimization, search engine marketing. Email marketing is still important. I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. Video marketing, in terms of telling your story, nothing's better than showing that. Text marketing, as long as you're encouraging and supporting the opt-in of that. Content marketing, when you think about what you are presenting to the public, your story, content marketing, you're very rich and very deep in that. Influencer marketing, strong enough, maybe not for your brand. But if you want to be perceived as an expert in what your mission is, whether that is through podcast, which I don't show here, but I think it could be critical to what you're doing. Influencer marketing, you are a thought leader in what you do, and you should be an influencer in the marketplace and the mission that you deliver, basically. So those are channels. And, I tell people, hey, we've got to focus. Earlier, you mentioned calendars, you mentioned other ways that you organize it. I think you really need to have priorities on what you're doing, because there's only so much time in a day, so many resources that you can apply. So these would be the top 5 things that I recommend you use and you prioritize in terms of channels. Your website has got to be rich with content. It's got to be search engine maximized, and it's got to be mobile friendly. 55% of people use, and that's probably goes up every single month as phones become more sophisticated, but 65% of people go out on their phones to find out information. You've got to be maximized for that. Email, yes, still, it's efficient, it has reach, and as Elizabeth said, it's complementary, and it can be supplementary to the channels that you're already using. Social media is got to be one of the best engagement tools. And while some people may be anonymous in social media, entertaining them and engaging them through social listening and media monitoring is important. It's been hard to do in-person events right now, but we know the connection and the exposure with them make them a really important and valuable channel for you. And then in this pandemic, virtual events. I think we all want to be live and in person. And I'm going to show you some examples in a minute of people that I think have done really, really good with virtual events. And some of them may continue. I don't know. Elizabeth, do you have a perspective on that, or anybody else? Please feel free to chime in on that.
Sure. I think that we know that this year virtual will continue while live is also opening up. And I know several organizations who had such success from having virtual events that they know that even in a fully open environment, they will keep virtual events because they were able to connect with people across the country or the world.
Can we hear from our group about that, what their thoughts is? I would love to hear that in the chat, people's thoughts, perspective on virtual events, success you've had now, and what you're projecting for the future. Chat it up. If anybody still here?
I know I've got people on here with opinions.
Yeah, I don't want to hear crickets out there. Oh, okay.
All right, one person said they're not doing their event this year.
And Herbert, what are you going to do as an alternative? Yeah. Oh, it's hard.
Our event usually attracts about 10 or 12 sponsors. And the ticket sales are almost nothing.
Wow.
Yeah, we sell maybe 2 tickets to the event, maybe 5.
That's all you've sold.
No, we haven't. That's normally in a year. The sponsor can bring 10 guests as a result of their sponsorship. So we get people there. But tickets at the door, unexpected people that it just never happens.
And is that
silent auction? The silent auction is a pretty big part of the event. But what we're doing and what we did last year is just I called the sponsors and said for obvious reasons we're not having the event. Will you still sponsor our program? And almost all of them said yes. They already had the money in their budget. We didn't make as much because of the silent auction that we didn't have.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm frankly I'm not going to go door to door to retailers now and ask them for stuff. I'm not going to open those. I'm not going to go there.
Yeah. Yeah.
They've had a hard enough time. And I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to go into 200 different businesses right now. And, I'm not going to ask anyone else to do that either.
Yeah. There may be an opportunity for you to thank them for their past support and then just hope they come on later, right?
Perhaps. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
Great point, Kevin.
This last year we made just a few $1,000s less. And it took 10 phone calls. Wow. Versus like hiring the caterer, hiring the tent, all of that.
Yep.
So it was, we're even thinking about continuing that and like not doing the event at all anymore, regardless of
Isn't that interesting? Pandemic. Wow. Isn't that interesting? You guys, I'm going to.
Probably not going to do long range strategy, but we're going to do it again this year.
Well, adapting is key. You guys, I'm going to go a little faster during some of these slides because I'm helping my daughter with a telehealth call because she's a couple months along in a pregnancy and her husband can't join them. But anyway, thank you for sharing that. So once we know what the priorities are, what does great look like? It's everything from awareness, consideration, conversation, and conversion. And this dovetails with why marketing is important. Brand preference and loyalty to what you're doing. And it sounds like, Herbert, when you just talked about that, you had a lot of organizations that are still loyal to you despite the circumstances. You want to engage members and your constituents. You want to keep building reputation. If there's a way to look for new donors and sponsorships, now some of this is in a different world than we're going through right now, building more traffic and generating more leads through the different channels that we talked about, keeping brand building and relevance and prestige. You can see there's overlap in some of these, and then donor and volunteer satisfaction and passion and continuing to feel good about your organization and your organization's mission. So let's talk. The final link is really what's your story and your strategy's purpose. And I find there are 7 purposes to what you're basically doing in terms of your marketing strategy and the story you're telling. You want to motivate people with the emotional plea. You want to teach them about what you do. You want to show them what you do. Telling is one thing, but showing them is another. And I'll show you what some organizations are doing in that area, show to show. Inform them in a concise and cohesive way about what you are doing and how you're doing it. Engage them and connect with them at your heart. And you can entertain them. Yeah, you can entertain in your mission. And then you also want to make sure that your content and your story is shareable and it's hit a nerve with someone and a positive nerve to share that. So what is the key elements to a story? And it's usually these 5 things. It's got a beginning, a middle, and an end. It shows a desire of what the effect of what people want to have. It talks about a challenge that they have. It talks about the change that they want to affect. It has characters, individuals that you care about and that have a connection for you. It talks about the struggle, the mission addresses. It talks about the setting, and it appeals to the senses, whether it's how you see this story, how you hear this story. And then finally, it brings a call to action. Here is what we'd like you to do as a result of seeing that story. Now, these are compelling storytellers, I say. And you know some of these organizations. I mentioned my involvement with the Evans Scholars and ENF that you see up there. I don't know if anybody's familiar with that. It's the Emilio Naras Foundation, which basically drives young kids to cancer treatments. And it started after Emilio's had the benefit of that. And sadly, the young man did not survive, but his cause, the celeb, was continued basically. But why are these compelling? They optimize channels. They focus on the results of the non-for-profit, what it does for people. They showcase individuals. They put a person to the mission. They use all those story elements that I talked about earlier, from optimizing channels. They pull at your heartstrings. Obviously, we all do that. What the cause resonates with people, and it's really, really, really timely. So that's what compelling story ideas or storytellers basically do. And here are some compelling story ideas. I'm going to leave this with the BMW Championship last year and a young woman who was honored as being the Evans Scholar of the Year.
Are you able to hear the video? Okay. No. Okay.
Yeah,
I
no
think.
video.
Okay. Sometimes I have to reshare with advanced sharing for the sound. Why don't you summarize for us here, Kevin?
Sure. What this is a young woman who was an Evans Scholar, was granted the scholarship, was named the Evans Scholar of the Year, and presented this caddy bib with the honor printed on the back of it. And that's presented by Bryson DeChambeau, who won the US Open a month or 2 after the BMW Championship. So that's a great example of using video within your efforts. And video marketing is really essential, I think, and increasingly valuable, because video is remembered. You put the face to an organization, but you can't do it better than video. The other examples that I'm showing here are from those storyteller groups that I mentioned. These are a combination of what's on their Twitter, what's on Facebook, their website. You can see Habitat for Humanity. Loved it particularly when they talked about what they were doing with their mission during COVID. I love the timeliness of the Jingle All the Way that was done with the Special Olympics in New Jersey. So I'm sorry that you guys couldn't hear that, but hope that explanation shows the value of video marketing. And here's some, what I found some interesting and compelling virtual events that people did during the pandemic. Virtual tailgate with the Cyclones that was a benefit for a local charity. Breakfast in bed was done. People did comedy events. Obviously, a lot of groups did personalized face masks. The other thing that I found was people were using Ask an Expert. So going to, whether it was a researcher, whether it was not, it was someone involved in delivering service or program for a non-for-profit. I call those inside voices, and nothing's better than doing the behind the scenes of what an organization does. And you can see with a great selfie there, and actually Oxfam distributing water within a facility in Africa, basically. So virtual and combined events, and I think we saw the value of those. So that's the strategy, from audience to walkaways, channels, great looks like, story and a strategy. When you do this in person, you can see the great value to this, because you walk away with a wall full of ideas and things that you probably hadn't thought about doing for your organization. So that's the model and that's the process. And I'm open for any questions, and I even posed some of mine. So what questions do we have out there in the world? That good, huh?
I have a question for the group while they're thinking through their questions. Are how many people feel that they're actually doing all of those things in their marketing? I imagine many are doing some of those things, but what I love about what you outline, Kevin, is how you take it from beginning to end, each process. And I can't say that I've ever worked anywhere that did all of those pieces and did them all well.
I have a question which probably goes into what you kind of asked, Elizabeth. If I can ask that the question to Kevin first,
Sure.
If that's all right.
Yeah,
okay.
Great.
At the beginning, we talked about what strategies we use, and if you develop a calendar and go through that process. We've done a little bit of that, but ours is definitely more grassroots and off the cuff. And I think the reason for that is we can plan our calendar and say, these are our 3 major events, these are our educational programs, these are our festivals, these are our member benefits. But 100% of the time, something else is going to come up, and it could be weekly, monthly. We are very we say yes to everything and figure it out off, when it happens. So us spending the time to create that calendar or create that year-long strategy, it constantly changes. So I'm in the side of, I'm going to just do it as it goes, do it as the time comes around, because spending that time up front for when it's constantly changing, to me, is not a waste of time, but it just from experience being here for 8 years, it seems like it always happens. So I'm that nope, we're going to do it as we go. We come up with ideas and don't have this year-long process because of the constant changes, and we are adaptable. I don't know if you have any advice for that.
Good question and great perspective there. Every organization has to adapt. I do think, if you think about a body, you've got to have a skeleton to that basically muscles can build around or whatever. So I wouldn't say go completely without that structure, because I think that's critical. But I think the willingness, understanding, and appreciation that flexibility and adaptability is built in. I mean, we haven't seen that at its total apex until in the last year. And things do change pretty quickly. You lose a grant that you thought you were going to get. You have to change the event. Herbert mentioned, sponsors come in a different way and different forms of engagement. But there are going to be months where you're going to have to fall back on what you've done traditionally, or what you can plan in the beginning are going to be the basis for what you want to do, what you want to say, those walkaways that I talked about. So you're going to want to adapt. But you also, I think, want to have your feet in the ground on a couple of things. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I think the skeleton analogy, I think that makes perfect sense to me. And I think we could definitely do more of that. And I think if I look at it that way, that makes sense. I'm going to have my minimal time up front for us and get my skeleton and my backbone. And then, as you said, everything kind of adds on from there.
Yeah, because it's hard to think of a 20/80 for that, because it could be 50/50. But I think, you got to basically, what do they say? A plan goes away as soon as it enters battle,
Yeah.
or as the Voxer Mike Tyson said, everybody can have a plan until they get hit in the face.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
I think if I could add to that too, what I have found, and having been on the staff side, I also was, maybe more reactive. But what I've started to find is that those events and those things that you're going to need to talk about, we're always going to come up, and just knowing that you have a space for that in your communications. But what I find is when we don't have a plan, we're not really driving the message, but the events are driving us. And so sometimes I think that storytelling gets lost, where we have something really important to say about our mission. One of the things I always look for with organizations is what is misunderstood about that organization, or what are people not realizing that we do? And so when you look for those things, you can actually schedule that in your communications and make sure that you're pushing on those things that people don't know or don't understand. But when we're always just like, oh, this next event and oh, this happened, we don't really get a chance to craft the message. We're really just promoting events or communicating about things that are happening. So I think that's the difference I would make in the plan versus no plan.
Good thought.
We have someone in the chat who mentioned that they're not really doing all of those things because they don't have the staff. And I think that is really common. And that is also where I would say, if you've put the upfront time on the strategy, you don't need to do all the channels, but you're covering all the main bases. And I think sometimes when we don't have all the staff, we don't spend as much time on the strategy and the planning out, which actually saves us time. So that's one thing I really encourage everyone on the phone, is really putting that front end time in will pay off in back end time. And part of what a plan does is also tell you what you're not going to do. Like, I'm not going to do Instagram, or I'm not going to do Pinterest because it's 70% female and my audience is mostly male. Whatever that is, you can say no to things too.
Yep. So guys, I have to jump off, but one of the things I wanted to say, and sorry about this, is two things. One, these are all the resources that I used, and I'm happy to share that. And Elizabeth, I don't know if we're going to share this presentation or how you want to do it, but you can see it's from Google Grants all the way down to social listening tools. But I think it'd be good, when you have that spare moment, to be able to go in and look at these different links and actually be able to get more perspective on this. And, I just want to end with thank you. I said I was the bald guy. I don't have on my headset now, but there I am. And then Elizabeth, did you want to talk through these last two slides?
Yeah, so I'll just share some of the resources the Nonprofit Coach provides. We do coaching packages, so 15 or 20 hours a year, where we're really just providing structure and advice and tools across the year, so that you're not paying for someone to do all the consulting or all the fundraising or everything that you need to do, but you're getting the information you need to be as effective with your time as you can be in the most affordable way. We have an online grant writing course for people who are interested in learning beginning grant writing by Barry Benson. And we do have people who do virtual events management at a top level and make that much easier for people. We create major giving programs, board trainings, all kinds of things. We also have a free series of executive director support, which I know some of you have participated, that are really fun.
And here's how you can find us.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you all for your time and for being here today.
Thanks, everybody. Good to meet you, and reach out however I can help. I know that was pretty concise and pretty brisk, but here to help.
Absolutely. And I'll stay on just for a couple minutes when we stop recording and see if anyone has just a couple questions left.
Sure. Thanks, everybody.